Thank you, Sanjay. Our chief guest of today's event, Mr. Ghanshyam Prasad. We have the vertical chairman, Mr. Anil Sardana. We have Mr. R.P. Singh. He was the chairman of the Regulatory Commission of UP. Of course, I knew him when he was with the late Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Bajpayee. And at the time I joined the ministry. So we used to have some interactions. This subject is very, very critical. It has always been critical, and I don't know how long it will remain critical. We sorted out through our electricity legislation many of the things on generation transmission we have done reasonably well. We could not sort out on the distribution. We tried, we put certain things, but thanks to different functionaries, different institutions, I think little bit of inputs that we put in the Electricity Act toward distribution sector reform, and that started with reorganization of Electricity Board that was successfully done. But not much has happened on the electricity distribution. And if I say that when I just was joining the ministry, that at the time Delhi was privatized, and Delhi is a success story. Wherever something has been done, whether franchisee or privatization, it has been, except for a few exceptions, a great success. I think incremental inputs have come. I remember when we did this rural electrification program, a massive program. And I don't remember any program of that dimension, of that nature, with 90% grant funding by the government of India. And the 10% also funded a small loan by the Rural Electrification Corporation. And it continued for years and years and years. And in that, there was one essential requirement, that to avail of this grant funding of 90% for expenditure on renovating, modernizing, strengthening the rural electrification systems, state has to agree to do franchisee. And the franchisee was input-based franchisee, not meter reading franchisee, not just routine, input-based franchisee. That means at different voltages, inputs of power will be given, and an agreed path of loss will be done, and it will be the responsibility of franchisee to manage this. Unfortunately, in UPA 2, that condition was relaxed. I think it has been to and fro. We want to reform distribution, and we want to de-reform distribution. We have very good provisions in Electricity Act. Open access was a good provision. We have a very good provision of tariff being fixed within plus minus 30% of the range, and a number of other issues. But we have not been able to successfully implement this. So far as this scheme is concerned, I must compliment. We have very important individual who contributed from the Ministry of Power. Ghanshyam is here. He used to be in the ministry. Alok was Secretary Power. I had one occasion of a brief intervention in this, very brief, for a few minutes. And I said that unless you put a little bit of meat into this on participation of private sector and make them accountable, it may not work. Now I find in evaluation, PPP has been done, and in the overall evaluation of 100 marks, only 1% or 1.5% is with the PPP. So therefore, it is a massively capex-oriented scheme. It has been very well done. I mean, scheme-wise, documentation-wise, articulation-wise, paragraphing, a lot of visions and a lot of objectives, a lot of narrations on systems, procedures, bidding documents, etc., etc. Much will depend on how it is implemented at the state level, and therefore my recommendation will be, and I followed so long as I was in the ministry, I had a strong belief that we make a scheme. Within 2 years of the scheme, we should review the scheme in terms of implementational issues, because we could have expected the scheme to go in a certain way. It doesn't go, and therefore there are some slips here and there, flaws here and there, implementational difficulties, cooperation, etc., etc. And therefore, review of a scheme should not be done at the end of the scheme, which normally in Government of India, in many places, planning commission, etc., they do after the scheme is over. We do a study and see whether the scheme was okay or not. And therefore, it would be good. Of course, it is somewhat delayed because of the COVID. I was talking to REC chairman the other day. Maybe it may be extended. It was till 2025. Maybe it may have to be extended. But requirements and expectations are huge. In terms of diluting them would be a danger. Normally, due to political expediencies and political considerations, when states after states are not able to comply with certain things, like you gave the example of franchisee condition being relaxed, we tend to relax this. So at the time when we frame the scheme, we are ambitious and we are systematic and we are comprehensive. And when it comes to implementational point, and we find many of the states are not in a position to do deliberately or unconsciously or because of variety of reasons, then we tend to dilute this. So this sector management, you can say one word, dilution in the distribution sector management, considering the realities. And those realities could be handled differently. But we handle those realities by diluting the requirements. Now that is the danger. So the title of the session is, how do we make it a success? The scheme, formulation of scheme, I give 100 marks. Implementation of the scheme will depend on how seriously we implement it and how seriously states take it. Many of the scenes, this is a scheme. Legal provisions relating to distribution have not been implemented. Legal provisions. Tariff policy is a statutory documents have not been implemented. Open access is a statutory provision has not been implemented. Large number of things which are statutory provisions coming out of legislation directly or legislative instruments directly, they have not been properly implemented. So experience of the past shows, and I'm sure ministry will be very serious, CA will be serious, and to what extent states are serious, we will have to see. Accountability in this would be an issue because private sector has been brought in an indirect manner. And I was loudly I was thinking that this scheme could have been used with a little bit of addition, that when you give the responsibility of fixing the meter with their money, and they are going to be in the form of annuity over a period of time, make them sub-licensee, because this becomes a part of the infrastructure of distribution. Meter and from 33 kV, 11 kV, beyond that, whatever you do is a part of the distribution infrastructure. If you make them sub-licensee, that could be an indirect way of bringing private sector participation. But private sector participation is not for the sake of it. I am not one who will believe. I have mostly worked in public sector myself. Private sector participation is to fix the accountability. In public sector, we are not able to do. Because I was addressing the regulators of the country, RP was there in that seminar. It was an AGM. And I mentioned that if we did not cooperate with the states and did not bail out the electricity distribution companies, most of them will be NCLT candidates. And you apply, because they are companies today. They are companies like any other company. Non-performance, inability to pay loan will make them candidates for NCLT. And that would be an indirect way of bringing in other players. But we are not able to do. So managing public sector on retail business is a tough task. I have always held that view. How directly, indirectly, or in a graduated manner, I have also held the view that we cannot privatize distribution, lock, stock, and barrel. Can we identify cities, towns which are very badly done and focus on them? This scheme does not cover that part. It is as a whole. And to that extent, I will, as I said, that much will depend on how it is implemented. 100 marks for the scheme. Implementation one has to see. And the last point that I made was that after 2 years of its implementation, we should review whether the scheme itself needs review. Thank you very much.